Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking the absolutely fascinating and, let's be honest, incredibly complex web of how power is shared and, quite frankly, dominated between the center and the states in the Indian Constitution. If you've ever watched Indian politics and wondered, wait, why does the national government in New Delhi have such an outsized influence over what happens in individual states? Well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to stick strictly to the constitutional framework to see exactly how this engine operates under the hood.
Right. Let's just dive straight into the core paradox here. Constitutional expert K.C. Ware hit the nail on the head when he argued that India is basically a unitary state with subsidiary federal features, rather than a true federal state. So what does that actually mean for us? It means that while India totally looks like a federation on paper, with distinct states, separate elections, local assemblies, the constitutional rulebook itself is explicitly wired to give the central government the ultimate trump card.
To really wrap our heads around this system, here is our roadmap. We'll start with the strong center by design, look at who makes the laws, dive into admin control and enforcement, follow the money, and then finally wrap up with the resulting power imbalance.
Starting with that first point, the strong center by design. The framers of the Constitution were highly deliberate with their choices here. Right from Article 1, they chose to create a union of states instead of a traditional federation. They absolutely wanted a division of power, for sure, but they intentionally prioritized a powerful central authority to hold the entire country together.
Moving on to our second stop. Who actually gets to make the laws? Let's talk legislative relations.
Think of Article 246 like a giant filing cabinet where every possible administrative subject is neatly categorized into 3 distinct lists. This is the absolute baseline for power sharing. You've got the union list, packed with 97 subjects handled exclusively by Parliament. Then the state list has 66 subjects for the state legislatures. Finally, the concurrent list has 47 subjects where both can make laws. Right off the bat, just looking at those sheer numbers, it's obvious the central government has a vastly wider jurisdiction.
But here is where it gets really interesting, because the center holds some massive trump cards. The Constitution actually has built-in exceptions where Parliament can entirely legally cross over and make laws on subjects that are strictly meant for the states. For instance, if the Rajya Sabha declares something is in the national interest under Article 249, or if there's a national emergency under Article 250, the center can also just step in to implement international agreements or intervene if a state's constitutional machinery breaks down. So the boundary lines are definitely there, but the center essentially holds the eraser.
Which brings up a great question. What happens when laws inevitably clash? Remember that concurrent list we just talked about where both sides can legislate? Well, Article 254 outlines the rule of inconsistency. If a state passes a law and the union passes a law on the exact same subject and they contradict each other, it's not a tie. No way. The Constitution guarantees that the union law will always crush the state law, making it void right where the conflict happens.
And the center's reach actually goes even deeper, directly into the local state level. Under Article 200, a state governor, who, by the way, is appointed by the center, can reserve certain state bills for the president's consideration instead of just signing them into law. This essentially hands the union executive a veto over state legislation, especially if a bill threatens the power of the high court or involves critical national interests.
Okay, let's pivot to our third area, admin control and enforcement. Because as we all know, making the laws is one thing, but actually enforcing them on the ground is entirely different. Look at how this escalates. It's basically a step-by-step guide to ultimate control where the center is undeniably the boss. Step 1. Under Articles 256 and 257, the union can give direct executive orders to states, mandating them to comply with Parliament's laws. Step 2. During an emergency, these directives become absolute rules. And Step 3. If a state outright refuses or fails to comply with a central directive, the president can just conclude that the state can't be governed constitutionally. That paves the way for president's rule, a complete central takeover.
And hey, this isn't just a panic button scenario reserved for massive emergencies. Even on a totally normal Tuesday, in day-to-day governance, the union's executive power overrides the states to protect national infrastructure. The center can command states to construct and maintain communications of national or military importance. We're talking national highways and railways. The states effectively have to use their own administrative machinery to enforce the center's priorities.
Now, all these laws and executive powers, they mean absolutely nothing if you don't have the cash to back them up. That brings us to Section 4, following the money, or financial relations.
Money is literally the lifeblood of governance. And when you look at how the Constitution divided taxation, it distinctly hands the most lucrative, high-yield, and far-reaching revenue sources exclusively to the central government. Massive moneymakers like customs and export duties, corporation tax, and taxes on the capital value of assets, those belong entirely to the Union.
Meanwhile, the states, well, they are left with a much tougher hand. They get taxes that are generally harder to scale and yield significantly less revenue. They control land revenue, agricultural income tax, vehicle taxes, and electricity. Interestingly, this explains exactly why state governments maintain such fiercely guarded control over alcohol excise duties and land taxes. For a lot of states, those are literally their only major, reliable levers to generate independent revenue.
Because this structural financial setup is so lopsided, the framers knew the states wouldn't be economically viable on their own, so they mandated complex revenue-sharing mechanisms and central subventions. Think of them as financial lifelines. Certain taxes are collected by the union but assigned to the states, while others, like income tax, absolutely have to be shared. It guarantees the states survive, sure, but it also ensures they always have to look to New Delhi for their checkbook.
And wait, the center's financial trump card extends heavily into borrowing too. The union government can borrow money without any territorial limits. The states, however, are kept on a super tight leash. They can only borrow within the territory of India. Plus, and this is a huge catch, if a state has any outstanding loans from the central government, which pretty much all of them do, they cannot take on a single rupee of new debt without the center's explicit consent.
Which finally brings us to Section 5, the resulting power imbalance in center-state dynamics. Let's bring all three of these pillars, the laws, the administration, and the money, together to see the big picture of the Indian Republic.
When you look at the source text, the conclusion is crystal clear. State governments just do not possess adequate independent financial powers, and this heavy dependence on the union government inevitably, undeniably curtails their autonomy. Through legislative overrides, administrative directives, and just overwhelming financial supremacy, the Constitution successfully achieves its original design goal, an incredibly structurally strong center.
So, that leaves us with a pretty massive, lingering question about the future of this complex constitutional relationship. As states continue to grow and demand more resources to generate revenue independently, will this structure eventually bend to allow them greater financial autonomy? Or is this built-in, heavy dependence on the center not just a feature, but the literal glue that holds the incredible diversity of Indian democracy together? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helped illuminate the incredible mechanics of power hiding right in plain sight.